we got one more thing before we get to hoorah and who cares.
Oh man.
And it's something that's popped up on social media, and we feel like we have to weigh in.
Yes.
But a few years ago, there was a head coach in Detroit who was fired after a 9-7 season.
Mm-hmm.
And now we have a head coach who's being celebrated for a 9-8 season.
Mm-hmm.
We want to give this credit to, it looks like Alame is who this photo was created by. But the question is this fair? Like, what's in a regime? Is Dan Campbell's 9-8 really better than Jim Caldwell's 9-7? And is the narrative accurate? I don't really know how to frame this question other than what's the difference?
It's a lot of difference.
Okay.
It's a lot.
Now
It's
I
a
have a
lot to this.
personal stake when it comes to Jim Caldwell, and I'll talk about it in a minute. But like, what
Okay.
are your thoughts on this?
This needs to stop. Lions fans need to stop. Like this was going on early in the season. There's a lot of misplaced anger in this. I understand those who are supportive of Jim Caldwell. Me and Ricky have talked about this a lot. I believe while I wanted him gone, if he would have got like another year, like a short-term extension after what he did with his records, I'd have been fine with that. I mean, he did pretty well. 11-5 first year, 7-9 second year, 9-7 in back-to-back in your final two seasons. And then the Quintricia era comes in and they
Yep.
say 9-7 is not enough. That is where the anger
It
rides.
is
It's not
100%.
with Dan Campbell.
No.
It's not with this regime. It's with what Quintricia left this team to be. It's not with what we're seeing with these coaches, man. So again, if you maybe could have made this comparison earlier in the season, because what did we see from Dan Campbell? The inability to make halftime adjustments, the
Mhm.
inability to be a good with clock management, the ability uh to like, be a methodical coach. We weren't seeing
Mhm.
that to start off. Second half of the season, that wasn't even a discussion. Dan
Nope.
Campbell cleaned up all his mistakes,
Yep.
and that was a problem with Jim Caldwell. He was bad with time management. He was really bad with his timeout usage, didn't make any kind of adjustments on either side of the ball. And one of my biggest problems that I always talk about, we see their personalities. Caldwell's a very reserved guy. Campbell's that rah-rah leader. And to me, I feel like that resonates more with the fan base, especially with what they've been through. When you go through things like the Seattle screw job on that Monday night game, the
Mhm.
playoff game against the Cowboys, what did Jim Caldwell do? Oh, hey, well, I mean, we just got to play better. We can't put
Yep.
ourselves out there. No, you got jobbed. We just
Yep.
talked about holding the league accountable. That could
Yep.
have been a ability for him to do that and to stamp himself with the fan base. He never did that. His players liked him, but I feel like it's a different level of connection now what we're seeing from Dan Campbell in this regime, especially considering the leadership as well. Brad Holmes, I think, is more he's more sought out for this and more built for it than a Martin Mayhew was. I just
Mhm.
think it's totally different. I think it's completely different, and these comparisons need to stop.
I agree 100%. Now, I was a Jim Caldwell fan, but that stems from a personal encounter. When I my first year of college football, I was playing football in a small school in Indiana, and Caldwell was the quarterback coach and offensive coordinator for the Colts. And
Mm-hmm.
we weren't that far from Indianapolis, and he came up and he did one of our team chapels. And so we got to he talked to us, and we got to ask some questions, and I got to talk to him about Peyton, who was my favorite player at the time, and he's just a super nice guy, great guy, right? And then he became the head coach of my team. I was like, "Oh, that, awesome." I remembered, talking to him, and it was great and fantastic and wonderful, and like I think that he'll do a good job. And don't forget that he also was the head coach after Tony Dungy in Indianapolis, and
Yep.
it went okay, but then ended poorly. And so he comes to Detroit, right, and goes 11-5, great, 7-9 is next year, and then back to back 9-7 teams.
Yep.
The criticism of Jim Caldwell is correct.
Yes.
There's no doubt about that. Now, did some of that have to do with the people who he hired as his coordinators?
Yes.
Joe
For sure.
Lombardi being one of them?
Yeah.
Okay. Matthew Stafford talked about how great Caldwell was as a head coach and as a player's coach, which I have no doubt about that. But you also had to be able to manage a game, which he did not do very well. So 9-7, 4 years into a stint, Yeah, it probably isn't good enough. Should it have been good enough for the Detroit Lions at that point in time? Yeah, it probably should have been.
Mhm.
Okay. But you hit the nail on the head. When your GM comes in and goes 9-7 is just not going to do it anymore, and then you hire somebody who doesn't even sniff 9 wins in his entire tenure here,
Right.
right? Like, that's not great, man.
Mm-mm.
But Dan Campbell's a completely different situation.
Yes.
These are not equal at all.
Mm-mm.
9-7, 4 years in, yeah, you probably should be a little bit better than that. Your GM wasn't great. Okay, I get all that. You had a plenty of turnover with coordinators and all that. But at the same time, this is year 2 of a very serious rebuild.
Yes.
A very serious rebuild.
Yes.
And you went 9-8 with a roster that really should have only been good enough for 6 wins. The offense, yes, helped immensely because they were a top 5 offense in the NFL. There's no doubt about that. Sometimes you can just outscore people.
Mm-hmm.
But that defense that they had, worst in the league through the first 7 weeks.
Yep.
Improved to 17th in the league over the last 10. Great. We'd love to see improvement, especially from the coaching staff. But these two situations are not similar
At all.
at all. Not even close. You know why? Because
Why?
9-8 now is kind of the floor.
Yeah. Exactly.
Now, if Dan Campbell goes 6-11 next year and then follows that up with a 9-8 season, guess what? 9-8 ain't good enough.
Mm-mm.
I don't think that's going to happen. But these two situations are not even close. And
I
they
think
shouldn't be
another
even considered close.
I think another big part of that difference is, again, you just spoke on about what point they're in. When they were with Caldwell, they weren't a young team trying to find their way. You had a Matthew Stafford led team that said, okay, how can we get this guy in the postseason? How can
Yep.
we get Megatron in the postseason? How can we get this young veteran talent in the postseason? This is a young team, like you said, it's super, super early, that's exceeding beyond expectation right
One
now.
of the youngest in the NFL.
Yes, that says a lot. You're not
It does.
He's given a little more leeway because of that, and because they're playing so well, it makes them that much more beloved. You didn't have that. You had a lot of pieces during the Caldwell era that people were iffy on. Like everyone, like you said, people didn't love Stafford through and through. That was not a thing with Lions fans. There was a lot of people who hated him, a lot of people who liked him. So it was not that much love consistently throughout. So they didn't have that with that roster, and it's a lot different from what you see right now with with Campbell in the Brad Holmes era.
I, I think that Lions fans, and listen, I love you guys. I'm one of you. I feel like since they can't be mad at the team anymore, they got to find something to be angry about.
Yes,
And it's just not, come on, let's move past that. As a
please,
collective group, we have a
please,
second year of a rebuild that went 9-8 with the I think second youngest or youngest team in the NFL.
yes,
That's now the floor. If you
yes,
come into 2023 expecting less than 9 wins, it's a problem.
yes.
9 wins is the floor next year.
Yep. Fred with an awesome point too. Yeah, Caldwell had a problem beating teams above 500. Campbell's done that. Beat the
Mhm.
Vikings. You beat the Giants. I don't know if the Packers were at one point above 500, but yeah, you beat good teams within the division. You got the wins that they weren't getting in that era. Like that means something.
Now, I'm not necessarily disagreeing with Ricky here. I think Patricia or
He's right.
Quintricia did Caldwell dirty for
Yes,
sure.
and the
For
fan
sure.
base.
Yeah. And the fan base.
Hmm.
Yeah, there's no doubt about that. But the problem that everybody's getting hung up on is when you go out and you say 9-8's not good enough. And then you don't get to 9 wins over the next 3 years.
Yes.
That's the problem.